Have you ever panicked, sold during a market crash, stayed in cash too long, chased a risky investment, or avoided difficult conversations about inheritance and family wealth? Most people think financial decisions are rational, and most of the time they are. But under stress, fear, uncertainty, or shame, something deeper often takes over. Your financial life is not just managed by your portfolio, it's managed by your psychology. Welcome to Inspired Money. I'm advisor Andy. Today we're exploring the hidden beliefs, family experiences, cultural messages, and emotional survival patterns that shape how we earn, spend, save, invest, give, and transfer wealth. In part one of today's show, we uncover the hidden money scripts shaping our financial behavior. In part two, we'll explore how those scripts affect investing, estate planning, inheritance, and advisor-client relationships. And then stay with us for part three, where Dr. Brad Klontz joins me one-on-one to discuss financial stress, self-sabotage, and how to begin rewriting the money beliefs that may quietly be running your life. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Seeking Alpha. If you're tired of noisy financial headlines, social media hype, and emotional investing, Seeking Alpha Premium is built for investors who want deeper research and smart decision-making. What I like about Seeking Alpha is that it brings together professional analysis, data-driven quant ratings, earnings insights, and investor perspectives all into one platform. It helps you cut through the noise and stay focused on long-term investing. Please note that this is an affiliate partnership. If you choose to sign up using my link, it helps support the show at no additional cost to you. Nothing discussed here should be considered personalized investment advice or a recommendation to buy or sell any security. Right now, Seeking Alpha is running one of their biggest sales of the year. From June 10th through July 7th, Seeking Alpha Premium is just $225 per year. That's $74 off the normal price. Their Alpha Picks product is $375, a discount of $124, or you can opt for the Premium and Alpha Picks bundle. It's a savings of $173. To learn more and take advantage of the summer sale, visit inspiredmoney.fm/alpha. That's inspiredmoney.fm/alpha. Now let's bring in our guests. Welcoming back to the show, Amanda Clayman. She's an internationally recognized financial therapist, host of the Audible original podcast, Emotional Investment. She helps people understand the emotional and psychological forces shaping their relationship with money. We have Ashley Quamme on the show. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist, certified financial behavior specialist, and founder of Beyond the Plan, where she helps advisors integrate behavioral psychology into financial planning and client decision-making. And rounding out our panel this morning, or this afternoon, wherever you are listening or watching from, we have Emily Bouchard. She is a family wealth consultant, founder of Family Focused Wealth, and host of the Wealth Coherence podcast, specializing in inheritance conversations, multi-generational wealth, and strengthening trust and communication within families. Welcome, Amanda, Ashley, and Emily. So great to have you here.
Thanks for having us, Andy.
Yes, thank you.
It's great to be here.
Well, let's dive in and roll segment one.
Your deepest financial choices are not driven by logic or spreadsheets, but by unconscious childhood rules called money scripts. Most people operate under four invisible forces: money avoidance, worship, status, or vigilance. These hidden beliefs silently dictate your tolerance for risk, your spending habits, and how you build your asset allocation. By treating partial inherited truths as absolute economic laws, you create predictable financial blind spots. True wealth management begins when you finally expose the secret script driving your money decisions.
Amanda, when somebody says, I know what I should be doing financially, but I just can't seem to do it, what's usually happening under the surface psychologically?
I would say that one of the things that's happening is that we have a misunderstanding of how human behavior flows from our motivation. So a lot of us think, as you were saying in the beginning, Andy, that this is the realm of logic and things that make sense, but that is really not the expectation that we should have. I think that most of us really misunderstand the role of our emotions in all of this, and really specifically the role that our body plays in terms of our automatic threat detection and response system. So all of these different sort of money beliefs that we're talking about, these assumptions, what they fundamentally come down to is not just about sort of how the world works. It's specifically, these are strategies about how to be safe in the world. So based on this prediction of how the world works. So these are coming from safety needs that are not the same as sort of human thriving and what our greatest sort of goals and values might be. And we really need to understand the role that this sort of safety orientation in our body has on the way that we perceive the options in front of us, the way that we're framing these opportunities to respond. Are these problems or are these things that we can sort of tap into a higher goal or value for it? But I think we really, really need to get better at understanding how our body's threat detection and response system shapes so much of the way that we perceive and operate in the world.
So it sounds like it comes down to survival. I want to ask Ashley, advisors like me, we often focus on numbers, risk tolerance, but clients are bringing emotional histories into every meeting. What are some of the signs in advisors actually dealing with a money script instead of a purely financial issue?
Yeah, there'll be a lot of statements being made, statements of avoidance. And avoidance might not be direct, like, I don't want to do this, but it might be something like, I'll get to this later. Yes, I'll do that when I have time. They might really mean that, but then behaviorally not follow through with that. For other scripts, I think about things like Vigilance, which is where financial planners work with a lot of clients who are probably a little higher, at least one partner might be higher on the Vigilance, and they pay close attention. So they may want to know like the details. They may also communicate some worry or distress. So we've had clients where, most commonly when there are market downturns, they might be calling a little bit more. They might be asking questions around, should I do this? Should I move this? Should I liquidate that? So there may be a lot of like questions or curiosity that might come from a place of distress or worry or anxiety. But there might also be some in the meeting behavioral cues or indicators. Sometimes if a client is fidgeting, that might be hard to recognize if they are virtually, but sometimes you can tell if they're like kind of shaking or if they are changing the subject. Maybe their eyes look a little glazed over or they're staring, kind of looking up and away. There might just be some clues there, like going on, nonverbal clues that could give you just kind of an indication that maybe a script is at play, but maybe one of these psychological factors, similar to what Amanda mentioned there. Maybe there's some threat of safety coming up and coming into play.
Mm-hmm.
Emily, in your experience working with affluent families, how do you see different money scripts show up between wealth creators and the next generation?
Oh, wow. How much time do we have? No, there's a lot of differences that can happen across generations. And then also I was thinking a lot about what Ashley was saying in terms of it within couples as well. But since you asked about like next generation, I would say that the biggest challenge that can happen is the wealth creators may have a sense of fear of not wanting the next generation to be entitled, really wanting them to show up, having a sense of their own wherewithal in the world and that they are productive contributing members of society. So they don't want to talk about the money, and there might be a fear of what it would look like if we did that. And then on the other side, this next generation, they may be needing to do their own planning. They may need to be thinking about like do they need to save for their children's college education? Do they need to be planning for their retirement? And they have all these questions and they want to be able to ask, but they don't want to come across as greedy or entitled. So they don't ask, and they don't want to be perceived badly. And it doesn't necessarily go well when they do try to ask. And so there's this huge gap, this huge void that happens when there's not a conversation happening about, what does this mean for us? What's the purpose of what we have? And what is it that what are our hopes about it? What are our concerns about it? And it really comes down to trust. Like everything that we're talking about has to do with trust, and how we are with money tends to express that. Like, can we trust each other in having these conversations? Can we trust each other in, if we have this knowledge about this information, that we're going to make good use of it?
Thank you for that. Let's go to segment 2.
The financial chaos or trauma your parents experienced decades ago is quietly managing your investment portfolio today. Events like family bankruptcies, sudden corporate losses, or messy divorces are deeply absorbed by a child's nervous system. Years later, this trauma resurfaces as destructive adult habits. You might find yourself hoarding liquid cash out of constant fear, or blindly chasing speculative high-risk trades to compensate for past scarcity. Your portfolio is acting out history until you heal the root cause.
Ashley, when markets become volatile and people panic, how can they recognize whether they're responding to current events or reliving old emotional experiences?
Oh, I think that's a fantastic question. In terms of how you can tell, I don't know if there's a single assessment indicator in terms of how you can tell, but I do think that there are questions maybe that you can begin to ask yourself. And well, I guess maybe there is an exercise. Maybe Amanda knows this exercise. There's a money timeline exercise, what we call, which is kind of taking kind of some steps back, looking at our experiences with money across our own time. So maybe that's an exercise you can do. But there are also, I think, about reflective questions that we can begin to think about. So I talk about a framework called Think, Feel, Do. It comes out of cognitive behavioral therapy. And so what I like to have clients explore is, okay, maybe this is the feeling that you're experiencing right now. What are the direct thoughts about it? Where did those thoughts come from? Like, where did we learn that? Where did you hear that in your past life? Growing up, who were maybe the people that said that in your life? And then we look at feelings. What were some of the emotions attached to that? So maybe perhaps if your parents were arguing, it's like, well, I just remember my parents arguing about this, and my dad would always say this, and my mom would always say that. Okay, so there were some intense emotions around that, maybe some anger. How did you feel? Oh, I felt very nervous and worried during those times when my parents were arguing and I would hear them talk about these things. Okay, so those were the thoughts maybe that you have. This is where they come from. These are the feelings. And now behaviorally, like, how do you take all of that and, start to act with money? How do you behave like with money? Oh, well, I tend to avoid. I don't want to pay attention to things. I just let my husband deal with that. Or I leave all the mail like unopened, whatever it might be. I don't follow through on the recommendations that my advisor gives me. So I like to walk through, this is so much more loaded than just like, hey, how can I tell? It really requires a willingness to explore just some deeper patterns and deeper experiences.
Emily, I know that you promote communication around money, and oftentimes I feel like on paper it's easier said than done. But how do you get families to talk more openly about money? Because it gets quite complicated if one generation went through hardships, and if they don't talk about money, future generations really don't understand, the family history.
Yeah, and one of the ways I start is by telling the families that they actually don't have to talk about numbers, and that seems to make them relax. And it's more about, like, a lot of what Ashley was saying, but like, what's our relationship to money, and what are the things that have shaped us around it? Like, I'm thinking about one family where they have a huge windfall. They have a liquidity event that happened, and the parents are wanting to be very proactive in how they're working with their three 20-something children about how to be smart about this and what they want to do about it, be intentional about it. So we started with their family values, what shaped them, what got them to this point, and what's the purpose of this, what do they want to use it for. But we also talked about some of the stories related to the family. And there's typically, as in this family, stories of like an uncle or a aunt or somebody that might have had a windfall or had an opportunity and they lost it or they squandered it. So the word squander was a big word in this family. And so we really took it apart in terms of what does it look like to squander money, and what does that look like as an identity issue, as a family issue, and what is it that they don't want to have happen as a result in their family with having this windfall. And then the other was recognizing that there was a huge pain point that had happened, and the father shared about a very difficult, painful thing that happened in his life because of a gambling error that happened with his father that led to losing a house. And it was so devastating for the family that his risk tolerance and his discomfort around like online gaming and different things that were happening with one of the kids became front and center as we start to talk about, oh, what is it that we don't want to recreate from the past, and what do we want to learn from the past? So I definitely take like a learning proactive approach.
Amanda, do you think most people actually know what their money script is, or are these beliefs that are invisible until we actually take the time to think about them?
That's a great question. And I will say that it depends on how well the money script is going for us. So if we're sort of humming along in our life and we aren't going to necessarily see the money script because it's kind of the water we swim in, more or less. It's that unconscious layer that just sort of says, this is what feels right. And as long as what feels right kind of works reasonably enough most of the time, we may not notice that we're experiencing or kind of running this automatic pattern, because again, that's very natural for human beings to do. It's an efficient way to be in the world. So where we run into problems is when that pattern, when that script is not a good fit for our circumstances, or we're applying that script too rigidly. Like none of the behaviors associated with these scripts are bad behaviors necessarily. It's just that we over apply them in situations where they're not helpful. So flexibility, as opposed to throwing out all scripts, flexibility should be the thing that we are trying to lead ourselves toward when it comes to how these scripts work. The other thing that happens is we get pushback from the people in our lives. So let's say we are a very money vigilant person, and all of a sudden we're in a relationship with someone who's looking at the proportion of vigilance that we have for the situation and saying, that vigilance really seems out of proportion to the level of threat or danger that I, from an outsider, would look at this situation and perceive. And that's kind of how we, I think, so it's not that the emotion that we attach to it is right or wrong. It's sort of that the intensity of the emotion and the rigidity of that emotional experience, that's the thing that becomes problematic. So I like to look at these things as not problems to be solved necessarily, but you asked the question before of sort of how we recognize when something is happening to us right now versus when it's an older script. And I think we should go into our engagements with money with the full expectation that money is going to surface in a normal and healthy way. Money is going to surface these echoes of old experiences. And it's the opportunity that we have in making decisions about our money and being able to revisit sort of the process of how we're behaving or making these decisions with money. That's where we have the opportunity to kind of update and refine some of these old scripts, or at least not let them automatically run the show when we are trying to make good decisions in the here and now. So it requires a little bit of kind of both and, like there's discernment when we sit down with money from what is the decision that I'm making today, but also sort of like, what is this decision that I'm making today providing an opportunity for me to kind of surface, to hear and hold and heal some of these shaping events from the past.
Interesting. So we may need a money Richter scale
Yeah.
because it's not about detaching your emotion from money and money decisions. But if we can measure magnitude when the indicator is going off the chart, maybe there's a problem.
I love that.
Okay, let's move on to segment 3.
We like to think our saving habits are strictly personal, but they are profoundly shaped by the country and culture we inhabit. Broad national and geographic environments permanently condition our financial behavior. Look at the massive divide on global balance sheets. High-saving societies preserve a huge portion of their domestic income, while consumption-heavy societies survive on continuous, credit-dependent consumer spending. Two individuals can earn the exact same salary, but their cultural scripts will create completely opposite financial destinies.
Emily, I love your podcast. I've watched some of your interviews, especially when you have multi-generational guests. What have you learned? How much do culture and family environment shape what people believe money is actually for when it comes to security, status, freedom, generosity, and survival?
It's such a great question, and it's one that I've been really diving into on more of a global scale. And one of the things that I've become more and more aware of is this idea of multi-capitals. And like right now, we're talking a lot about money, right, which is the financial capital. And what I'm seeing, and there's like really engaging conversations happening all over the world right now in terms of what is this economic system we're in, and how can we possibly shift it, and how can we bring a sense of some sort of monetization of other capitals that matter to us in terms of things that we care about in terms of the world, in terms of other ways of engaging that don't have to do with financial wherewithal. So I really want to expand that whole conversation around the capitals that we have access to and the money, and how we can deploy it in ways where we can have a real impact. So I think impact has been a big conversation I've been seeing, and again, like bringing forward with a lot of transparency and research, and really showing the older generations why this is a useful, valuable thing to do too, and really advocating for that instead of just being in reaction to it.
Amanda, many people live in environments where spending and status, they're constantly rewarded socially. How difficult is it psychologically to resist those pressures?
Ooh, I would say resisting any pressure is pretty difficult psychologically. It takes a lot of energy for our system to do that. Negative goals, like whenever we're trying to desist from something, that's one of the hardest things that we can do. And so one of the ways that we can make that easier on ourselves is to continually bring our attention back to what it is we're for. You know, what are those goals? What are those values? So for example, like it's not, I think if let's use savings as an example. If we are waiting until the end of the month to figure out how much we have left to save, that's going to be a failed experiment, because we will find many things to spend that money on during the course of the month. Whereas if we already have the allocation of sort of like, this is where I want all of my money to go, then having direction for all of that money changes the calculus of the decision from, do I want it or do I not want it? Do I have the discipline to resist it? Do I not have the discipline to resist it? To how do these goals relate to each other? And therefore, can I construct conditions that help call me to that goal for myself, that growth edge? Like, how do we turn these experiences into experiments where we set ourselves up for success? And some of that absolutely can be learned in setting these conditions for ourselves. But I would say that one of, that saying, like the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. I feel that way about discipline. Sometimes, like our oversubscription to willpower and discipline as these solutions to the things that feel unsafe or out of control is less effective, I think, than taking a more constructive view of like, how do I help myself build a pathway that's going to move me toward my goal instead of just always, I think a lot of us default into that sort of fear position of what is it that I'm trying to avoid? What is it that I'm scared of? And that is an hardwired physiological condition that I think we as modern humans need to adapt our strategies for.
Ashley, when couples come from different financial backgrounds or cultures, what are the most common conflicts that you see around spending, saving, or investing?
I'd say those are three just common areas. The thing about culture that couples don't often realize is that culture really hands us a script for what money means. And even beyond that, who we are. So not just what it means, but also who we are from a place of identity. I think I saw somebody mention in the comments that word like identity. And so culture gives us that. And oftentimes when two partners are coming together and they're merging their lives and they're merging, potentially their financial resources, like we don't take those things into account of who we are and where we come from, how all of that shapes the way in which we do money. That can start to show in ways that we spend, save, invest, but also how we give, how generous we are. I'll share just kind of a quick story. I was working with a couple where one partner was from the Middle East. Their parents had immigrated over, and the other partner was white, Caucasian. And the partner from the Middle East, their parents had grown up in war-torn country, hence the move to immigrate over to the United States. But this family, from a cultural standpoint, they were very focused on land. So on assets that, land and real estate, like those were things that were really, really important. And the partnership, the couple in which we were working with, that was the focus. It was how can we just allocate all of our financial resources to spending on land, to getting a house. And it didn't quite make sense to the female partner in this case, or even to the financial advisor. It was, what is the obsession here, like with land? Like, why are we so obsessed and like preoccupied with like needing this when there are other financial objectives or goals here that we're working on or that need to be met? And it wasn't until we took a step back and we started to explore a bit more around the money history or the scripts, if you will, but where each partner was coming from and how that was shaping and informing the way in which they were making these financial decisions, that we realized that the reason for this male partner that he was so preoccupied with wanting land and real estate is because culturally that represented safety for him. That represented safety and security for his parents. If we own land, if we have it, it is ours, we are safe and we are secure. And what this, the husband didn't maybe overtly like realize is how all of that messaging that he grew up hearing his parents talk about it, extended family members that maybe were still overseas, like how all of that just shaped for him the belief that, hey, owning land, owning real estate is really, really important in creating wealth, but more importantly, in creating safety. So, it shows up in spending, investing, and in saving, in giving. It shows up in all of these ways, Andy. And I think that for couples where maybe they are coming from different cultural backgrounds, regardless of race, they can come up, the same race, but coming from different cultural backgrounds, like it really does require you going back to that think, feel, do exercise. I know it might be a bit redundant, but it's one of these just kind of very quick, like I say easy, but like light ways of entering into this space of exploring, like, what does money mean? Why do I have these thoughts that I do? Why do I have these feelings that I do? And some of the other things that Amanda had mentioned, earlier too, around just these factors and creating safety. But when couples can do that, when they can sit down, it's not so much the way in which they spend, the way in which they invest, or even save. Like usually those things, I say that they're figure outable. Like those are really easily like figure outable solutions. But when we understand kind of what's underneath and where they're coming from, our defenses are less likely to emerge there.
Ashley, I think you may have a fascinating book in you, just talking about the cultural differences. And yeah, it's really interesting when you look at older civilizations and cultures. There is a tendency to have an affinity for gold, for real estate ownership, and very interesting just to see how that carries forward into one's modern day money beliefs. So far we've explored the hidden forces shaping financial behavior, childhood experiences, family dynamics, culture, and emotional conditioning. Because when these hidden beliefs go unaddressed, they don't just affect spending or investing, they can damage family relationships, derail estate planning, and destroy multi-generational wealth. So in part 2 of our show, we're shifting from origins to consequences. What destroys family wealth faster, a bad market or unresolved emotional baggage around money? Think about that for a second. Welcome back to Inspired Money. I'm advisor Andy. If you're just joining us, today we're exploring the hidden psychology shaping financial behavior, investing decisions, inheritance, and family wealth. I'm joined by financial therapist Amanda Clayman, behavioral finance specialist Ashley Quamme, and family wealth consultant Emily Bouchard. In this segment of Inspired Money, we're going to examine what happens when hidden money beliefs collide with real life, estate planning, inheritance conflict, emotionally driven investing, in the difficult reality advisors face when psychology overrides logic. Let's jump right in and go to segment 1.
It is time to step out of the dark and confront your own financial psychology with an active script audit. By walking through a targeted self-diagnostic framework, you can map your deepest emotional vulnerabilities and money blocks. This audit forces you to answer the tough questions you usually avoid, exposing why you procrastinate on taxes, ignore account balances, or panic during minor market corrections. Confronting these hidden habits gives you an actionable template to rewrite your financial future.
A quick shout out to Marcus and Kat for tuning in and sharing their comments. And to answer Kat's question, we will share all of our guests' websites so that you can find them. She had asked, can I get all of your business cards? So thank you, Kat, for that. We appreciate it.
I love an engaged listener. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Ashley, if someone wants to better understand their own money psychology, where should they begin?
There's a few different places they could begin, but I think that depends. So typical standard practitioner answer, well, it depends, Andy. I will say that most commonly, some clients like to start in the present. So what is happening in the here and now? And I think that can be for some the easiest place to start because it's the most relevant. Amanda talked earlier about motivation and discipline and things like that. And I think that when we start to understand who we are in the present, why it is that we, behave the way that we do, think and feel the way that we do, it feels a little bit more relevant. And so understanding that psychology then can be like motivating for, well, then how can I change it? What do I want to carry forward with me? So starting place, maybe it's exploring like, why is it just so easy for me to get on Amazon and just hit, add to cart, buy now. Like, wow, like that is really easy for me to do. And I don't think much about that. Like, why is that? Or why do I feel like so strongly anytime that my partner, brings up, hey, can we talk about the budget? Like, why do I get this really strong feeling inside of me? What's that about? So starting in the present can be an easy, relevant place to start that can also lead to some motivation and how can we make changes. The other place is somewhere back in time, Andy. Pick a point. A really common question that I think practitioners on the financial advising side, but also in wealth consulting or even financial therapy, is they'll say, what's your earliest money memory? And that is not a bad question. Starting at the very beginning is not terrible. But you don't have to start at the very beginning. There's nothing that says that you have to start, on the day in which you were born, in a dark, dark room, surrounded by, you don't have to start there. Just pick some place back in time that you have some, really maybe detailed memories about. So for myself, like my starting point is not very, very early. My starting point is actually in high school when I purchased a snowboard, not knowing how to snowboard, and boots. By the way, they were Roxy and they were black and pink and super cute. And I thought I was going to be the most fantastic snowboarder out there. And so I spent a lot of money on this purchase, went out to the slopes. And I was not an awesome snowboarder. In fact, I hated it. It was painful. It terrified me. And here I was pretty well invested in this purchase. And now, probably not going to be using it. So like I share that humorous stories. Like that's a point in time that's very vivid for me. I remember it. It's easy for me to access and go back to. And so when I, was early on kind of in starting to learn more about my own money journey, like that was where I started. From there and understanding what was that about. So, you can start in the present, but it's also okay to just pick a point, in your past that feels very detailed that you can remember and try to understand that a bit more.
Regrettable purchases are a good place to start because we all have them.
I know.
So I guess on that topic, Amanda, because when we think about our financial behavior, sometimes that requires confronting uncomfortable truths, right? And we may also have either denial or shame that we feel when going through that process. How do you help clients to move past that reaction?
So moving past that reaction starts with having that reaction first. I find that a lot of times what we are hoping for when we start to engage with money is like, we are in a place where money is painful or something about money is not working right. And we want to know what the solution is so that we can jump over the painful part and land in the new, things are working better and we've healed and done all of that. But the beginning of that process is, first of all, tolerating and becoming aware of and sitting with simply what is. So money, a lot of times I find with my clients it's an emotional problem that's presenting as a thinking problem. So we think we have to figure out the solution to something in order to feel better. And I sort of try to reverse that and turn it around and say, like, let's first of all reconceive of this activity called doing money. Doing money is not just about solving a particular kind of external math problem. Doing money is a full body, full context experience. And we need to, first of all, normalize that being emotionally activated is a normal and workable part of this experience. So it's not something to conquer or eliminate. This is precious information about our lived experience and about the unconscious patterns that direct 70 to 80% of all of our activity. So this, to me, like, I like to position money work, even just the money work around like sitting down and looking at the state of our money on a regular basis, like once a month. Doing that money work, it happens within an emotional container. So I really try to prepare clients to construct with great intention this emotional container where we sit down, where we engage with the process, which means becoming aware of our physiological state, the emotions that are in the room with us. Then there's a process of kind of opening up and exploring, what are the questions? Let me gather all of this information. So we move ourselves through a process whereby we learn to experience and to tolerate the emotions that are kind of impacting the cognitive process that we're also having, such that we can do that in an integrative way, which to me is the best way to not only arrive at the best outcome in terms of financial decisions and behaviors. But from a therapeutic standpoint, because I'm here as a pure play financial therapist, I'm not doing any of the advice piece of it. I really look at money as this one of the greatest opportunities that we have to surface and heal a lot of the experiences that we've had as people. And so I am an evangelist for this message, that we begin by noticing, accepting, inviting in, tolerating these emotions, so that we have the capacity, we build the capacity to be able to work with them in conjunction with making, hopefully setting ourselves up for better financial outcomes.
Emily, what have you seen with families going through this kind of self-audit together? What tends to surprise them the most?
I think we're in a really interesting moment in time that I just want to highlight, because there's a New York Times best-selling book out right now called Strangers by Belle Burden, that is a in-depth, like diving in, looking at what led to the financial painful points related to a prenup when a marriage came apart. And she does it so brilliantly. And I wanted to highlight this because she was a trained attorney, and he was hyper vigilant in terms of how he managed their finances, and yet was not transparent at all about his financial life. He'd never lied to her, but she never asked about it. And it was this fascinating thing where she looked back and saw that, oh, he's not to blame here in a lot of ways. Like, she really looked at the histories that they both had, what they brought to the marriage. She came from more means, and really shared her the value of her 2 different trust funds she had to buy beautiful properties that they enjoyed and lived in, and she loved having, and she shared them at 50% with him. And he did not share his financial life with her. And the most telling part of the story was that she allowed for a change in the prenup conversation and agreement based on something he asked for, which was any monies that were earned or brought to the marriage as a result of things that happened during the marriage. If they weren't combined, then they were kept separate. And she went against her legal advice, and she did not tell her family that she had made that change. And she looks back and says, wow, I really see that I knew that that was not a good idea. It was not in my best interest to do that. And yet I did it. And it brings forward this notion of how do we have transparency in a way in relationship that is totally respectful and honoring of the relationship and honoring of each other, and that furthers the relationship and the intimacy and the deep care and respect for each other. But where we don't need to necessarily fall into roles, like traditional roles. And like I think we said earlier, the thing about, oh yeah, the husband handles the finances, and she even says in it that she would sign the tax return, but she would only look at the page that he gave her, which was the signature page. She never asked for looking at the entire return, and she was well trained to understand it. It wasn't even that she couldn't have understood it if she didn't see it. So I love that this is this moment in our culture, that this book has made a huge impact. A lot of people are reading this book. And I was thinking about, like, how do you start? You start by saying, hey, I'd love to do a book club on this, or I'd love to read this book, or have you had a chance to read this book yet? Have you heard about it? And opening up that dialogue and conversation as a couple, within a family, advisor to a client. I'm really a proponent for bringing resources to the conversation that can help open it up and allow the family to really get connected on their financial lives. I'm laughing because we had a great comment for Ashley that she took a dangerous risk-taking attitude by getting her snowboarding equipment.
I feel validated. I feel validated.
Well, that's a great way. I think definitely we should add Strangers, Memoirs of a Marriage by Belle Burden to our summer reading lists. And let's move on to the next segment.
The greatest threat to multi-generational family wealth isn't bad market performance or flawed legal paperwork. It is hidden psychological anxiety. Unexpressed wealth shame and inheritance anxieties cause individuals to constantly procrastinate on essential wills and trusts. When heirs hold conflicting internal money scripts, it creates an explosive environment. Without open communication, the resulting post-mortem litigation and emotional friction can completely tear family enterprises apart, destroying a legacy regardless of how well the legal documents were drafted.
Amanda, what emotional fears tend to surface when people think about discussing inheritance with their children?
I would say all of the emotional fears are present. There's a lot of performance anxiety, obviously, as parents. We want to do a good job, and we see how well our children thrive or where they struggle as very much a reflection of our performance. I think that's very emotionally scary to parents. I think also when it comes to wealth creation, there's a sense of falling in love with the fruits of your effort, looking at this financial legacy that you have created, and really having to confront one's own vulnerability about what does it feel like to hand off something that has been under my control into even the people that I love most in the world, my family members, my children. What does it mean for me to lose that absolute power and control over what has probably been a very important domain of someone's life? We run into problems where, like, maybe there's a child who shows a lot of competence and interest in money, and another child who has a very different path. What does fairness mean in that kind of family? We run into like capacity issues, drug abuse, things like that. Do we treat everyone equally? Is that the value of the family? Or are we making sort of individual distinctions? And there's not necessarily a roadmap that works for everyone in all situations. And I think that that's very frightening for people who want there to be rules. But in the absence of rules, what we see is like a lot of real pain and interfamilial conflict around those things, where it's sort of like, but if you just perform to the expectations, if you just did it the way that you're supposed to, a lot of parents putting in a lot of rules around, like, you only get your inheritance under these conditions. So we're using money as a means to control other people in the family, which, trust me, is a very double-edged sword when it comes to both financial behavior and those family relationships. So everything is going to really come up. And I think that it's incumbent upon families to look at the things that they are not talking about as part of the process, or where they are saying sort of like, if everybody could just follow these rules, but there's a lack of sort of distributed power in making those decisions and having those conversations. Sometimes we try so hard to solve a financial condition that we really damage the relational, like, when Emily was talking about different capitals, like the relational capital of the family gets absolutely decimated to try to protect the financial capital of the family. And that's a challenge for intergenerational wealth transfers and family culture.
Emily, why do estate plans fail emotionally when they've been set up or when they've been well designed legally?
Yeah, I think it's a good dovetail from what Amanda said. I think that we have phenomenal advisors that really understand how to minimize the tax implications of a wealth transfer, and making sure that however you're designing your estate plan, you're really transferring efficiently and effectively, and making sure as much money stays within the family as possible. And they're doing their job really well. The issue is, are the family members that this plan is for able to live in that plan? Are they prepared for what this plan means? What does it mean to be an owner of something when you actually don't have any say, or when some people are part of it but you're not? Or What does it mean when you've had something transferred to you, but then you have to always have an interface with a trustee in order to have that? Like, what's the relationship with that? And when you do really great planning from strictly a financial piece, and you're not looking at the relational, the emotional, the intelligence even side of it, you're not necessarily setting up people for success. And so what you really want to do is, before you make anything like set in stone, is you want to make sure that people are ready for what this means in terms of their roles and responsibilities. What does it mean to be a good beneficiary? What does it mean to be a trustee? What does it mean to be an owner of shared property? What are we going to do with this property after the grandparents aren't here anymore? Like, how do we move together as a family so that we can stay solid and strong with what's been transferred? And it's hard, right? Because you don't want to come across as being ungrateful, right? But if you're being given a huge impact on your life, I mean, there's a great analogy that's often given of inheritance being like a meteor. You don't know how big, you don't know when it's going to hit, you don't know what it's going to do, but once it hits your life is not going to be the same again. And it's important to recognize that there is an impact and that it needs to be addressed. And the more you can prepare people ahead of time and have them be part of it and be included and informed about what it means, the better.
Ashley, when heirs have very different money scripts, how can advisors or families prevent conflict before it escalates?
I think first and foremost, advisors have to realize that they are also bringing themselves into the relationship. And that what that means is that they're bringing their own scripts into it. They are a part of the system. And so, you know, what that can mean or look like is, if an advisor is not entirely aware, is that they could be making judgments or recommendations that for the client that might be more appeasing their script than it is in the best interest of the client. And, sometimes that may not always be bad, or wrong, but it is important to know this recommendation around how to set up this trust or work with this trustee. Is that coming from and being informed by my own beliefs around what quote unquote should be, or is this truly what the client wants? That can be really tricky. So, I think first and foremost, advisors have to be aware of themselves, what they're bringing to the relationship, their own biases, their own, beliefs, their own money scripts, and how is that informing this. I think, the other piece for advisors is recognizing their scope. Like, where is my lane and where is my scope here? Sometimes, advisors, they are fantastic. They are fantastic, but sometimes they try to live in areas or live in a lane where it might be better to pull in somebody like Emily or to bring in somebody like Amanda or myself that can see some of the other pieces and parts that are going on that maybe the advisor is not able to see. So I tend to work in the medical or the mental health field, like we call it a treatment team approach. Like, can we take a treatment team approach to working with this family? Some of it is it takes a little bit of the emotional, I don't want to say burden, but the emotional, baggage there off of the advisor. It gives them a support sounding board, a support system while still caring for the client. And they can watch for things that maybe the advisor isn't really trained on, there.
Great advice. Let's go to segment 3.
Wealth managers face a severe ethical and operational crisis when a client's core psychological scripting overrides rational planning. When toxic money worship or status scripts take over, clients obsessively demand volatile, high-risk investments. They will completely ignore your math to protect an emotional survival mechanism, actively threatening their own baseline security. Advisors must master clinical behavioral diagnostics, bridging the gap between emotional trauma and wealth preservation before panic causes catastrophic liquidation.
Ashley, what should an advisor do when a client wants to make a clearly emotional or self-destructive financial decision during periods of stress or market volatility? Asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend, yeah. So the very simple answer is that they have to make room for the emotion. I think sometimes advisors try to fight it with logic. They try to employ what we call the writing reflex. Let me just jump in and fix the solution. Let me tell you all of the reasons why you should not worry. And while that is well intentioned and more than likely comes from a good place, it's also incredibly dismissive. I use the example of when for most partners, anytime like my husband has ever said, like in the history of our relationship or just relationships in general, hey, you should calm down. Never, ever have I or any other person been like, you know what? That is a fantastic idea. I should just calm down and not feel this way. And so, what happens, like when advisors are met with emotions, when they're, met with distress, emotionality, they tend to try to employ logic and solutions here. Let me show you all of these projections. Let me show you all of these numbers, all of these reasons why you should not worry. And they're thinking that is going to then turn down the dial on how emotional a client is feeling. And so making room for an emotion in a conversation would sound something like, hey, this makes total sense why you might be worried or why you might feel really, upset about this or concerned. Like, I completely understand that. There's a bit of, validation in there, telling the client that it is okay to feel that way. Just because a client or just because you validate a client's feelings and tell them that it's okay to feel a certain way, it doesn't mean that you agree. I think sometimes like we think that, well, if I tell this person that it's okay to feel that way, or it makes sense why they might think that, then they're going to get the impression that I agree. And, I would imagine for at least all four of us here on this call, there are probably plenty of times we've had clients where it's like, I get where you're coming from, and I absolutely do not agree with the choice that you made, or the decision that you went with. But we can give room to validating, and what that does from a brain standpoint is that it turns down that dial, Andy. It just turns it down, the emotion just enough. It helps to soothe them. If we think about when before we came on here, we were talking about kids, our own kids. And think about when our kids were really little, like babies, and when they would get upset and they would cry. Instinctually, like we would pick them up, we'd, rock them, we'd soothe them, and we would them, right, to help them calm down. When we validate a client, when we give them that validation and tell them that whatever it is that they're feeling, that it's okay and that there's room here in this relationship for it, it's that adult version of self-soothing them there.
Kat likes the "don't tell me to calm down." I think that's a universal.
Is that Taylor? I was going to say, is there a Taylor Swift song should be playing in the background right now? Is that Taylor Swift?
I felt myself get calm just hearing you describe that interaction, Ashley.
That is a good one. Emily, family advisors are often pulled into pretty emotionally charged family dynamics. How can professionals remain neutral while still helping families to move forward productively?
Oh, it's so good. And I think we talked earlier about how advisors need to be aware of their own scripts. They also need to be aware of their own emotionality. They need to be able to emotionally regulate themselves, because they could get quite swept up in the emotional dynamics if there's a lot going on. And, you have somebody come into your office and say, I need to like write somebody out of the will. Like, it's like, oh, wait, like, you're really upset with them right now. Like, let's tell me what happened. But you don't have to necessarily get caught into that. I often use the analogy of Aikido. I studied it for years, and it's just a really useful frame, which is blending with the person and whatever their emotional, needs are in that moment, and then directing them where you would like them to go. But it doesn't work if you try to like stop it right away. I think that when advisors are aware, and it's so important to be aware that there's an emotional issue, it's really great to slow things down. I was thinking about one family I worked with where the advisor was doing their huge presentation about their estate plan and a huge decision they made in terms of some wealth strategy they were going to do. And there were 3 sisters and a brother, and the parents were there, and they're all really well educated. And I was there as the family coach, and the brother said something, and for the advisor, it just seemed like a natural comment to say. But knowing the family, I knew that he had just set off 3 emotional landmines for the sisters in that moment. And it was this moment of just, I had permission to coach. So I was able to just lean in and say, oh, hold on a minute, because I really want them to hear what you're going to say next. And I think that because of that statement, there might be something that might get in the way of them hearing it. Are you open to just pausing for a minute? Let's everybody take a breath. Everybody take some water, and let's just like do a reset. And if we have a sense of what might have had the brother say this in this moment, what do you think it might be? And had the sisters kind of reflect on what his positive intent was, because we'd done some work on that already. So instead of immediately going into their fury about what he said, having a sense of, oh, he's not necessarily being malicious. He's just unconscious about something. And then having the brother then be willing to talk about how that might have landed for your sisters, how they might have heard that. And then facilitating it in such a way that I was able to diffuse the explosion before it happened. And then the advisor was able to go on. And afterwards he said, I had no idea that was in the space, and I would have missed it completely. It was like, oh yeah, that happens a lot. And that's why it's so nice to have that treatment team mentality, to have somebody there that can really help with gauging what the emotionality is in those moments. If an advisor is aware, just slow things down, pause. Water is really helpful. The brain needs water. And taking a pause and having everybody write about what might be happening for them in that moment, to help get it out of the mind and out of that reactivity that's happening. And then they can bring their logical mind in if they're writing, if they have to physically write. So those are a couple of things I would say.
Appreciate your financial Aikido. Amanda, Ashley established that we should not say, you should calm down. When we get emotionally activated during financial stress, what helps to bring us back to a calmer, more rational state?
So there are a few things that I do, and I just want to agree with the earlier comments about kind of inviting this in and being present with it. Sometimes what I'll do is just ask clients to be conscious with what's happening with their body. Like, what sensations are they aware of? So like that helps us come back to, this is a physiological event as much as it is the way that we think that we're responding to, which is like, here are these external factors that are causing me to feel the way that I do. Like, I am just the object that is being acted upon by these external factors. Whereas when we come back into our body, that very naturally helps us realign with sort of what it is that we're experiencing and how it is that we're putting this together in our kind of brain and body. So becoming present with that, giving our bodies a chance to re-regulate. So doing a little bit of a neurological reset, whether that's taking a few breaths, putting hands on heart. There's a really funny nose squiggle one where we kind of squinch up our noses like a bunny, and that can, help us calm down so we can work with the body. When we feel like the world is against us, sometimes we need to come back to the body as our safe place to begin to then, extend that zone of safety outward. Another framing I use a lot with people is when they start telling me all of the things that I'm worried about this, I'm worried about this might happen, and they're sort of projecting into the forehead. I say, tell that to me in the form of a scary thought. So that creates a little bit of a distance from how we're experiencing these events. So it's like, I'm having a scary thought that I'm about to run out of money. I'm having a scary thought that I'm never going to be done paying this debt, etc. So we've now, I think, more appropriately put these events in the frame of personal experience, in the frame of how our body is sort of dealing with these personal experiences, etc. And we start to use ourselves as a resource, so that the idea is not just like, there's this thing called money that we need to do. It's like, how do I steward myself as the resource and as the agent who's doing these money things. Because that always, I think, connects us back to that internal locus of control, especially when it comes to establishing a sense of safety from which we can then operate and I think be our best and highest money selves and just selves in general.
Thank you for the framing and the tactics. Before we go to part 3, I just want to thank our incredible panelists for such a thoughtful and insightful discussion. Amanda Clayman, Ashley Quamme, and Emily Bouchard, thank you for sharing your expertise and perspectives on the psychology of money, investing behavior, inheritance, and family wealth dynamics. And for everybody listening, I highly encourage you to follow their work. I'll be sharing their websites in the show notes at inspiredmoney.fm. You can find Amanda Clayman at amandaclayman.com. Ashley Quamme, you can find her URL at, beyondthefp.com, and Emily Bouchard, emilybouchard.com. Thank you again for joining us today. We're going to quickly reset the program as we say goodbye to our guest panelists. You, Inspired Moneymaker, you've made it to part 3, our final conversation of the episode, and we're going deeper into the hidden psychology driving financial behavior. Have you ever looked back on a financial decision and thought, why did I do that? Why did I panic sell? Why did I avoid dealing with this? Why do I keep repeating the same financial patterns even when I know better? Because in the moments of stress, fear, uncertainty, or shame, the emotional survival systems in the brain can override logic and long-term thinking. This conversation is about what happens when financial psychology collides with real life. Market volatility, inherited trauma, wealth anxiety, self-sabotage, and the challenge of building not just financial capacity, but emotional capacity around money. I'm advisor Andy. Joining me now is Dr. Brad Klontz, a financial psychologist, behavioral finance expert, CFP professional, and associate professor of practice at Creighton University's Hyder College of Business, where his pioneering work on money scripts has helped shape the modern field of financial psychology. He's the co-author of 8 books on the psychology of money, a fellow of the American Psychological Association, and his work has been featured on ABC News, CNBC, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, NPR, many of the world's leading financial media outlets. So we're going to explore why smart investors panic under stress, how hidden money beliefs shape financial behavior, and what it takes to finally break those patterns. Dr. Brad Klontz, welcome to Inspired Money.
I've been everywhere except on your show, so I'm super excited to be here. My camera is kind of funky here. It's making me look thinner, but I'll take it. I'm super excited to be here with you, Andy.
I don't know if we can adjust that, but maybe it's good.
I like the look. I like it.
Yeah, normally the camera adds pounds, right? So
exactly.
You can eat more. You can eat more today. All right. Well, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here finally. Let's get right into it and roll segment 1.
Your brain evolved to respond quickly to threats and uncertainty, not to navigate volatile financial markets. During moments of financial stress, such as a market crash, job loss, or sudden debt burden, emotional survival systems can override deliberate, rational thinking, triggering instinctive fight, flight, or freeze responses. These reactions are often shaped by prior financial experiences and emotional conditioning, which means panic selling, avoidance, or impulsive decision-making may feel automatic in the moment. Lasting financial resilience requires more than technical knowledge. It depends on learning how to recognize emotional activation, regulate stress responses, and create systems that prevent short-term fear from driving long-term financial decisions.
Brad, why do smart, rational people suddenly make irrational financial decisions during periods of market stress?
It's a fabulous question and something I've thought a lot about. As you've mentioned, I'm into 10 books at this point, lots of studies on this stuff, essentially to try to figure out why do I do such dumb things when it comes to money. And I think I've nailed it down to understanding it as if we are a bunch of cave men and women, and we are in a tribal society. We're afraid of everything. We're hunter-gatherers, tribe of 100 to 150 people. And I think it kind of explains most of the reasons why we screw up when it comes to money. So just as a quick example, let's say we're all sitting around the fire, 150 of us, as I said, constant threats all around. All of a sudden, everybody gets up and runs west, and you're sitting there eating your turkey leg. What are you going to do? Well, I'll tell you what your ancestors did. They got up and they ran west with everyone else. The people who didn't go on to produce offspring sat there and just got picked off by a predator. So when it comes to like panic selling or getting really excited around the latest crypto scheme or whatever, get rich quick scheme, we're just wired to do it absolutely all wrong, because that brain has not evolved to deal with modern financial life. And we're still stuck in the Stone Age when it comes to our reactions to pretty much everything. And by the way, that's just one example of how that plays out. That metaphor will really help us understand pretty much all financial behaviors.
Was there a moment early in your career when you realized that financial behavior had more to do with psychology and emotional conditioning than, say, financial literacy?
Yes. And I've done studies on increasing people's financial literacy, and I've done studies on looking at the psychological aspects. And for example, we did a study where we did it in 5 different cities across the country, where we gave half the people a financial educational seminar, teaching them how to save and the appropriate ways to do it, and the saving vehicles and healthy financial ratios, all the stuff you learned in preparing to become a financial advisor. In the other room, we had people identify their money scripts, which you've just talked about. We had people come up with a positive vision of an exciting future, really sort of trying to harness this cave person brain and target it in the direction that is in our best interest versus it working against us. So in that, we had no financial literacy training at all, basically. It was just trying to increase people's psychological motivation to identify these goals and being willing to sacrifice in the here and now. That's not the way our brains are designed. For example, in our cave person brain, there is no saving for the future because the future is absolutely uncertain. It helps explain why we overeat, because when we are around a bunch of calories, easy calories, salt, fat, sugar, we consume as much as possible. This is how we're wired. And I know you know what I'm talking about, everybody who's listening. You have to overcome that. You have to overcome that natural wiring, or you're going to end up obese. And it's one of the challenges of modern society, where we have all these available calories, where we're just prone to overeat. And so it's that psychological wiring to consume now that keeps us from preparing for the future. So to go back to your question, in that study where we had people take that financial education seminar, we saw a 22% increase in savings after an hour. And don't get me wrong, that's fabulous. 22%, that's unbelievable. In the psychology group, which was an hour, where we had people thinking about their motivations and their money scripts, we saw a 76% increase in savings. And what I've discovered over time is that most of our financial problems in the United States come from 2 things. Number 1, people aren't saving for the future. And number 2, people are spending more than they make. And I have yet to find somebody who doesn't already know what they should be doing. So everybody already knows they should be saving for the future. Everyone already knows they shouldn't be spending more than they make. Yet these are the 2 biggest problems we have in the richest country in the world, in all of human history. And so I don't think it really comes down to education, although education is really important. I'm a professor, I'm not trying to disparage education, but when it comes to actual motivation, actual behavioral change, I think it's much more psychological.
Well, we're facing a multi-billion-dollar marketing industry trying to sell us stuff, right? We're being sent marketing messages all the time. We also have technology that's making it easier and easier to make a one-click purchase, and then suddenly things show up at my door, maybe later today or tomorrow. So shopping's becoming easier. You talk about the importance of interrupting emotional reactions before they become financial mistakes. So what are some of the practical tools investors can use in real time when, say, fear starts taking over?
I love it. So the first concept is essentially understanding that you cannot trust your instincts at all when it comes to investing. You are wired to do everything absolutely wrong. And there have been studies that have found that dead investors outperform living investors. I mean, that's how bad you are at it. And what I mean by that is where they look at accounts where the account owner happened to be deceased, they outperform accounts where people are alive, because when you're alive, you're paying attention to the markets, the latest fear, this, and it happens all the time. Oh my goodness. And it's always, I call it, it's bubble babble on the one side where it's like, oh, the market will never go down and I got to get in and things have changed. Everything's different. Everything has changed. By the way, nothing has changed. Everything has changed. I have to respond in a different way. Well, the market's always recovered and gone up, but not this time. This time it's the end of the world. This time everything's different. And I've been alive long enough now to see it play out in real time. And when you study history, this is exactly what happens time after time after time, is we think this, but this time it's different, whether that's fear or whether that's on the greed side, which I think is really fear of missing out, frankly, where we feel like everyone else is making a bunch of money and we're not. And so I feel like it will continue to happen. It's been happening all throughout history, throughout recorded history. There's been bubbles and crashes, and it all comes down to the same human psychology, that fear of missing out, that fear that I'm going to be left behind, which to your brain is a life and death matter. That's the part that doesn't fit with current investing. So you're going to respond to a market dip or a market run up in the same way. Your brain's going to respond to it in the same way as if there's a predator chasing you and you're running for your life.
Okay, so this time is not different. We're going to go to segment 2.
Many people unknowingly operate with an internal financial comfort zone, shaped by childhood experiences, social comparisons, and cultural conditioning. When sudden success, a major inheritance, or significant financial change pushes someone beyond what feels emotionally familiar, the discomfort can trigger subtle forms of self-sabotage, from overspending and risky behavior to avoidance and withdrawal. In many cases, the greatest threat to long-term wealth is not market volatility, but the unconscious need to return to what feels psychologically safe. Sustainable wealth requires expanding not only financial capacity, but emotional capacity as well.
So Brad, talk a little bit about money scripts and this internal financial comfort zone. Why do some people unconsciously self-sabotage when they begin earning, inheriting, or accumulating more wealth than feels emotionally familiar?
I'm so glad I started with this prehistoric metaphor of a tribe, because it fits perfectly with the financial comfort zone concept, which my father actually came up with in his observations, working with athletes, movie stars, lottery winners. We've done many of that work over the years. And essentially, let's go back to the tribe, okay? So you have 150 people closely related to you. You guys all eat the same stuff. You have the same size dwellings. Somebody might have one more horse than you do, but everyone's within a similar range. You're a tribe. And think about that in modern life as a socioeconomic tribe. So I grew up lower income. I remember the day that I got really uncomfortable when I went to a restaurant and there was more than 2 forks. I mean, I was like, what am I supposed to do here? You accidentally gave me 2 forks. I felt really out of place. I didn't know what to do. I was very uncomfortable. I look around, I don't see anyone I recognize. And by that, I mean, people kind of dress like me. I just felt like really out of my element. That's what happens when you all of a sudden get more money. And when I say all of the sudden, that's what makes it more challenging. If you're getting more money and growing your net worth over decades, you learn this along the way. But the biggest threat is when people all of a sudden get a bunch of money. You see it with lottery winners. Now we're seeing it with NIL, all these young athletes getting money. And you are just wired to blow it all. And it might not make a lot of sense on the logical side, but it makes entire sense on the psychological side. Imagine if you got separated from your tribe, you died. That's essentially what happened. One of the worst things that could happen to you in prehistoric times is for you to get banished. You know, you hear about banishment in history. You're like, what's the big deal? It's like, well, the big deal is that you died and your children died. You got kicked out of the tribe. You no longer had that tribal protection. You no longer had that affiliation. You no longer had other people sharing resources with you. And so what we have found is that when people all of a sudden go above or below their financial comfort zone, that socioeconomic tribe, they have an existential anxiety attack, even if it's a bunch of money and it sounds like it should be great. But what happens is people start to look at you differently. Trust me on this. So they'll start to look at you as if you're selfish, like you have this money, you're not sharing it. You're going to be thrust into a world that feels very uncomfortable. Like many people, for example, who grew up low income, they don't know anything about investing. They've never met a financial advisor. They've never met an attorney. They've never met a CPA. These are like foreign people talking about things they've never heard of in a language they don't know. And so also, if you grew up lower income, you're very likely to not trust people from other tribes. And by that, I mean, you might have some money avoidance beliefs. You know, you might think that rich people are greedy or they can't be trusted. There's a whole mindset and a whole set of beliefs about these other people. And so what tends to happen without intervention, without help, people end up blowing all the money. So they end up giving it away. Depending on how much money you get, you're going to get a hit up for loans. You know, I got this business startup. Would you fund it? And what are you going to say? No, you're going to say no to this. It's easy to say you're going to say no, but what if it's your sister, your brother, family members? So there's all this psychological, social pressure that's put on you. And what I have found is that people sort of subconsciously get rid of all the money. And I've heard people who've come into millions and millions of dollars be like, this feels like a curse to me.
So how do you advise people navigate that? What are some of the hidden emotional challenges?
It's super tough. So my latest book is over here, Start Thinking Rich. And we have a chapter in there that says, if you want to get rich, you got to get rid of your poor friends. It's like, what? What are you talking about? That sounds horrible. We talk about it though as a mindset. So broke is you have no money. Poor is a mindset that you need to break out of. Because if you surround yourself with people who have a poor mindset, and I don't care if they're making $200,000 a year, I don't care if they're making $1 million a year. If they have a poor mindset, it is going to leak all over you. And by that, I mean people who aren't thinking about saving and investing for the future. They're more focused on the present experience of spending money for status or for enjoyable experiences while negating the view that the future is important to save and invest for the future. The bottom line is, the people in your tribe, there's a certain shared belief system around money. There's a certain shared set of expectations about what you're going to do with money. And just understand this, if you're comfortable in your current socioeconomic life, great. You don't need to meet a new tribe. You don't need to learn another language. You don't need to challenge some of the ways that you're automatically going to deal with money. But if you want to climb the socioeconomic ladder, if you're middle class, you want to become wealthy. If you're poor and you want to become middle class, you are going to have to start challenging the beliefs and assumptions that are baked in your brain and that the people around you have. That's just the bottom line. You're going to have to learn a new language. You're going to have to learn how other people do it if you want to change.
I'm hearing two very difficult things to do. One is that you may have to change your tribe. But the second thing is, for somebody who realizes that they've outgrown their own financial identity, they need to change themselves. So how do they begin building the emotional capacity to comfortably hold greater wealth and responsibility?
You know, one of the thoughts I have is that you need the mindset before you get the money, or you're going to blow the money. And it's not because you're stupid. It's not because you're lazy. It's because this is just how we're wired to do it. And so what's the easier route, frankly, is to do it the way most people do it, which is gradually over time, where you're saving and investing a certain percentage of your income over time that grows. And it's funny, I know as an advisor, I know you see this, where you'll see clients who've amassed $2 million, $3 million in investable assets. And they don't look at themselves as rich. They don't see themselves as this way. Actually, that'd be pretty offensive to them, frankly, because they live a very modest lifestyle. The reason that they've been able to amass some investable assets, and this is, by the way, most self-made millionaires in the United States, this is how it happens, is because they're delaying gratification. They're, driving Toyotas versus luxury cars. They're not wearing $15,000 watches. They've got that, what I would call a rich mindset. It's important to save and invest. It's important to delay gratification. Of course, enjoy life now, but before you do that, make sure you're saving and investing to meet your goals. And so I think it's understanding and researching, and I've done actually a lot of research on this too, the psychology of ultra wealthy individuals. It's researching that mindset. So if, let's just say my goal is to become a millionaire, study millionaires, study what they do, study how they think. You might have to start with podcasts, channels like this, reading books, get into the mindset. How do these people get to where they are now? And find somebody you can relate to. You might be looking at me and saying, I can't relate to you. I don't come from where you're from. Find a model, an example of somebody you could connect with, be it, gender, race, ethnicity, where they're from, religion, whatever it is, someone that you can take away all the excuses that you're going to have. It's like, well, they did it because of X, Y, and Z. Find someone just like you. Study their mindset, study their habits. What did they do? What's so fascinating about this is it's not that complicated. I'd love to tell you it's super complicated and then sell you my course. But it's really not. It's a real simple set of fundamental skills and mindsets that anyone can learn. And I really encourage people to learn it when you're broke. It's the best time to learn it.
The power of mindset, and we can change our mindset over time. Let's bring it home and go to the last segment.
Financial patterns formed early in life often persist into adulthood unless they are consciously examined and challenged. Real financial transformation rarely comes from willpower alone. It requires identifying inherited beliefs, understanding the emotional experiences that shaped them, and intentionally developing healthier, values-aligned behaviors over time. By building greater awareness around emotional triggers and practicing new responses consistently, individuals can gradually reshape their relationship with money. The modern fiduciary increasingly serves not only as an investment advisor, but also as a behavioral guide, helping clients align financial decisions with long-term well-being, resilience, and purpose.
So Brad, you talked about the power of mindset. Can you talk a little bit about, say you inherited money and you have a money script that is negatively shaping your financial life? What does the process look like of actually rewriting a specific money script?
So awareness is super important. And the great thing about the conversations you've been having today is that hopefully it raises people's awareness, because we just sort of assume we have it all figured out. I mean, we really do. We think we've got life figured out. We think we've got relationships figured out. We think we understand how money works. Rich people are this, poor people are that. And that's sort of the dangerous part of our psychology that we always need to be challenging and overcoming is this belief that you've got it all figured out. Here's the bottom line. If you are living the life you want to live, if you're achieving all of your goals, if you're having the emotional experience you want to be having every single day in your relationships, when it comes to your financial life, in your career, beautiful. Just enjoy it. Enjoy the ride. If you are having some uncomfortable emotions, some experiences you don't really want to be having in your relationships, in your financial life, in your career, that's when you need to sit back and say, okay, I have constructed some type of reality for myself here that I am not enjoying very much. What's happening here? And that's where it's beneficial to dive into the beliefs you have about money, your money scripts, where you got them, how you learned them. And there's many ways to do this. I've got a test you can take, and we've used it with 100,000 people. You can take it for free at moneyscripts.com. That will put you in one of the categories that we've discovered in our research. Or you can ask yourself questions like, what did my mother teach me about money? what did my father teach me about money? I mean, one of the best things you can possibly do is to actually ask your mother and your father and your grandparents, if you're blessed to have them alive and still in your life, sit down and interview them. The best conversation I ever had with my family around money, sitting down with my mom when I figured out that I was screwing myself up when it came to investing, and trying to figure out her psychology. Mom, what was it like for you growing up around money? What was it like for grandma and grandpa? Oh my gosh, I got to tell you, Andy, that changed my entire life, hearing the stories about what happened to my grandfather. Because as my mom's talking, I'm like, oh my God, no wonder I did what I did. And just to see these patterns that just go through the generations, I was totally unaware of it. I was totally unaware of why my mom had so much anxiety around money. And then I found out, well, my grandpa, he lost all his money in the Great Depression, like literally went to the bank one day and all his money was gone. And then I was like, oh my gosh, no wonder. Like, he lived in a trailer park. He died in a trailer park in his 90s. He was a hardworking guy. He never put a dollar in the bank the rest of his life. He had this trauma. And then all of a sudden, my mom's anxiety about it, she would never invest. She was too afraid. And then all of a sudden, what I did, which was I swung to the opposite and I started to day trade, thinking that's how people got rich, lost all my money. I just repeated the same pattern that my grandpa had repeated. And if I wasn't aware of that, I'd still be doing it, you know? And so take those moments of pain, take those moments of frustration, take those moments of failure that you're having in your life. Again, we're talking about money, but it could be any category. Take those as opportunities for you to do an internal introspection on what's happening. And I'll say this, Andy, too. The research we've done on the ultra wealthy shows that they have multiple psychological characteristics that are very different than the middle class and poor. But one of them is they have a higher internal locus of control. Internal locus of control. And in psychology, what that means is the outcomes they're getting in life, the fact that they have a failed marriage, the fact that their business failed, the fact that they just lost a lot of money in investing. What they do with that is they immediately blame themselves. And this is a really tough thing for people to do, but they're more likely to do it and they're more likely to be successful as a result. So when their business fails, they're not saying, oh, the government and the economy and all these, terrible rich people or whatever. And by the way, these people might be very worthy of blame. Don't get me wrong, but that's not their focus. Their focus is, okay, what was it about me that led me to trust this person? What was it about me that got me into a business that from retrospect now is clearly the wrong one? Why did I trust that person? What is it about me? That is where the gold is. That is where the gold is to lovingly blame yourself for everything. It's the most beautiful thing. I promise you, once you can get over, whatever, feeling shame and embarrassment about making mistakes, once you can get over that, which I hope happens really quickly, blame yourself for everything. By the way, your husband or wife will love it if you do that.
It's a double benefit. That is a huge insight because, we can spend all our time and energy blaming the world for our problems, but the world isn't going to come up with solutions for us. When you blame yourself, you're taking on a level of accountability. And the next step is to say, well, what can I do about this?
Absolutely. And so that's the best piece of advice. If you ask me the one thing I'm trying to teach my two children, I've got a 13-year-old and an 8-year-old. It's like, blame yourself for everything, boys. It's going to help you out. And I always tell them too, like, oh, Dad, they try something new. It's like, I'm not good at tennis. I'm like, bro, you suck at tennis. Are you kidding me? You've never done it before. Like, what do you think? You're supposed to be good at this? You know nothing about this. So I really normalize the fact that they're utterly ignorant and terrible at every new thing they try. And if your parents didn't raise you to become a financial expert, if you didn't get a degree in finance, are you shocked that you're horrible with this? If your parents didn't teach you how to use a credit card, are you shocked that you ran up a bunch of credit card debt? Are you kidding me? I mean, it's like driving a car without having any instruction. Of course you crashed. Like, what were you expecting? And so just trying to normalize in your own life failure is really helpful, and just sort of dissect it. Okay, I failed. Clearly, there's things I don't know. And so how can I go about learning them? That's really the key.
I think we're going to leave it there. Dr. Brad, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a fascinating and incredibly valuable conversation. I think that my biggest inspired money moment from today is that so many financial decisions that look irrational on the surface are actually deeply human underneath. Sometimes we're not reacting to markets, spreadsheets, or numbers at all. We're reacting to fear, uncertainty, identity, our family history, or emotional stories that maybe we've been carrying them for decades and not even realizing it. And that awareness can be incredibly powerful. And finally, I love blaming yourself, taking accountability. And that locus of control is something that it really focuses our attention on our own actions. What can we do to improve our situations? And I think acknowledge all the mistakes that we've made along the way, that we're going to learn from them and we're not going to repeat them over and over again. So one thing I want to share with you today that I want you to do, ask yourself, what is one belief about money that I inherited growing up? That idea may still be influencing your financial decisions today. Write it down and then ask yourself, is this belief helping me build the life that I want today, or is it holding me back? Because you cannot rewrite a money script until you first recognize it. Before we wrap up, a huge thank you to Dr. Brad Klontz for joining us and sharing his insights on money scripts, financial psychology, behavioral finance. If you'd like to learn more about Brad and his work, visit his website, bradklontz.com. Is that right, Brad?
Yep, that works.
He also posts to all the socials. You can get bite-sized nuggets at Dr. Brad Klontz on TikTok, which I thought was kind of surprising, but his videos on money psychology and financial behavior, I think that they've attracted millions of views and really helped bring these important conversations to a much broader audience. Brad, is there anything that you would like to share or plug or leave our audience with?
No, I don't think so. I just love to connect with people on any social media platform. And you mentioned TikTok. I'm willing to make an utter fool of myself there to try to capture a younger audience. I do believe that if you have the right mindset around money, if you have it when you're young, it's pure gold. And so I'm trying to reach a lot of young people as well as people across the age spectrum. But I feel like there's so much of this that we weren't taught. There's so much shame around money. And so give yourself a break. You made mistakes. We all have, and it's all about progress.
Well, thank you for carving time out of your summertime schedule to be with us. Really appreciate it. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share the conversation, and leave a comment with your biggest investing psychology takeaway from today's show. A special thank you to the Inspired Money team, Bradley John Eaglefeather and Chad Lawrence, for helping produce today's show and making conversations like this possible. And Inspired Moneymaker, let's stay connected. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search for Advisor Andy. This is Inspired Money. Until next time, do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens. Thanks, everybody.